The only thing that I did was, even if I'm getting free at 1 a.m., I just have to open my books for 15 minutes. If after 15 minutes I feel like I'm done, I don't have the energy, I can just sleep it off. It's fine. But then more often than not, what happened was that those 15 minutes turned into an hour. Vida, I think it was mostly about sort of unlearning what I knew about reading, because I've been reading books practically all my life. So I read like a book or two every month. I mean, there were gaps, of course, but that's my usual average, right? So I thought I knew about reading, and verbal should not be a problem. But then I gave my mock and understood that this is not what I thought it was going to be like. Then I understood that there's one concept that I haven't tried, and it was, of course, e-GMAT recommends it, but as I was going through the questions, I was not doing it thoroughly well, was pre-thinking. So I went back to my concepts, went back to the questions I was doing wrong or correct, and then understood how it was suggested to pre-think. Again, took a couple of days to sort of force myself to pre-think, not jump right into the choices. Because once you start pre-thinking, there's no going back. I understood that it's so addictive, because once you do that, then going through the options is like a breeze.
Hi, Akshara. Thank you.
Hi, Rita.
Yes, thank you so much for coming, and congratulations on a 2-month 70-point improvement to a 695 with a V84, D86, and a Q84. So congrats on that huge.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Rita.
Yes. So I've been your mentor for some time. I know you pretty well, right? But for our viewers out there who are seeing you for the first time, tell us a little bit about who you are.
Right. I come from Jaipur. I have been in consulting for 4 years now. I graduated from SRCC in 2020. So I decided giving GMAT. This is my first attempt. So I decided to give GMAT this year itself. And for all the people who are out there who are in consulting, they know how difficult it is to manage work with studies. So that's what the biggest challenge about GMAT while uh, that's what the biggest challenge about giving GMAT while being a working professional is. So that's going to be my entire journey, I'm telling you.
But it's a journey you came triumphant out of, right? Because when
Hmm.
I say that 695, you improved on the verbal from the 25th to the 90th percentile. In DI, you've hit that coveted 99% percentile. So it's really a journey where you have come out on top. You've beat the GMAT quite effectively. But like you mentioned, you're a consultant, you're busy, time is of the essence, and you started this prep in July and took the test in about
Yeah,
August.
yeah.
So I'm sure the first thing that you really did was sit down to plan, right? When you were planning, what were the big things that you really focused on that you turned around to make this GMAT success happen?
Right, right. I mean, the biggest change or the biggest promise sort of that I made to myself is that I'm going to open my books daily, and that worked. That worked wonders for me, because even if you're getting free at, let's say, midnight or 1 a.m. in the morning, you don't have the energy to study, and that's fine. But then if you don't study, that coursework keeps piling on, and it's a week, and then you haven't studied, right? So the only thing that I did was, even if I'm getting free at 1 a.m., I just have to open my books for 15 minutes. If after 15 minutes I feel like I'm done, I don't have the energy, I can just sleep it off. It's fine. But then more often than not, what happened was that those 15 minutes turn into an hour or 1.5 hours, and then you feel like, yes, you have done something related to GMAT for the day, right? I mean, it's if it's you're in the concept stage, you can just have a couple of videos that you can do, or if you're in a practice stage, you can just do a couple of small tests. That's what helped me. I mean, just to keep me in the mix, just to ensure that I don't have a single day between July and August that I'm not opening my books. I mean, there were days, of course, but then that's the best, on a best effort basis, you do that, and that's where you sort of come out on top, thinking that, yes, I'm doing something, I'm just moving. Then that feeling that gets you all the way to the test day, that really helps. That was the first thing. Secondly, of course, sitting down and understanding what you think would be a reasonable timeline for you to target. What do you start with? What do you do next? And then how do you sort of complete your course before GMAT, right? So that's when, and of course the mentors, Akash, who was my mentor before you, and then you also suggested that I should focus on quant and get quant out of the way because it was the strongest section in my mock, right? So, and that is a strategy that really helps. I mean, you just sort of fortify the score that you've already gotten in quant or any other section that anyone is giving a mock for. So you just sort of get, okay, that's it. That's my score. This is all going to change till the GMAT day. This is what is going to get me to the final score that I want, right? So you can start with your strongest section if that is quant, because quant is also the lengthiest section. So once you get that out of the way, verbal and DI seem like a breeze, right? You can get that done in a couple of weeks each. So that's what I did. I started with quant, sort of got done with it. Like I'm getting reasonable scores. I'll come back to it. Got into verbal, then DI, because DI needs both verbal and quant related concepts. This is the strategy that I adopt. Yeah.
Wonderful. So throughout, it really looks like that structure and that consistent touch with your prep is really what enabled that success, right? Because you didn't allow the GMAT and what you learned in this journey to really slip through your fingers. You held on to it tight from day one till the day. That's
Right.
wonderful. Okay. So I know you prepared for Quant first, but let's really talk about verbal because on verbal, you've improved by a massive 8 points from the 25th to the 91st percentile. So that's a huge, huge jump, right? And we'll
Mhm.
look at what you did in master comprehension, CR, and RC. But if you had to really talk about what it takes to go from the 25th to the 91st percentile, what are those strategies? What are those key changes you made?
It's Vida, I think it was mostly about sort of unlearning what I knew about reading, because I've been reading books practically all my life. So I read like a book or a two every month. I mean, there were gaps, of course, but that's my usual average, right? So I thought I knew about reading, and verbal should not be a problem. But then I gave my mock and understood that this is not what I thought it was going to be like, right? So even though I can read fast and I can understand things fast because of all the reading that I've done, it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm comprehending it at the level that GMAT requires, right? So first of all, I had to sit down and convince myself that you have to sort of unlearn about reading, whatever you thought you knew. Now start at the scratch. You have to read slow. You have to understand every word before moving to the questions, and it might take some time for you to just get down to that 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes per question, but that's okay because that's what we're here to sort of gradually improve on, right? So that's when, like, sort of deliberately pushing myself to read slowly, not rush through the questions, read all the options carefully, because that also happened to me quite often, that reading the first 5 6 words of the option, I thought that the option was sort of out of scope or was wrong, so I just skipped through that option, but then it was the right option because we missed something at the end. So that's some of the things that I deliberately asked myself to do, even though it was taking longer. Like for a week, it took a lot of effort to sort of get into that practice. But then when it did, it became a second nature, right? You read slowly, of course, the time improves, but then your comprehension also improves, right? So that's something that deliberately everyone has to do. You have to understand what works for you, and then sort of what you have to throw out the window, what you have to keep in, right? So that's the first thing that I did when I was not seeing an improvement in verbal, even after studying a few concepts. So that was the first thing. Secondly, you have to keep in touch with reading apart from your GMAT questions as well. So either if you have time, you can read a book, but I did not have time. So I got into the habit of reading newspapers daily, like practically daily, because those have articles, so they can help you with your RCs. They have other news articles that you have to sort of read through, analyze what's going to happen, right? So those 25 to 30 minutes daily, I contributed to a newspaper, and being informed so close to your interview dates might also be useful, because you might do well in your interviews because of this also. So I sort of stopped reading books for a while and shifted to this. So that also helped me. The third thing was, and this is sort of midway through my verbal journey, I realized that I'm again, after reading slowly, comprehending well, I was able to improve my score, let's say 3 or 4 points, but it was still not there. Then I understood that there's one concept that I haven't tried, and it was, of course, e-GMAT recommends it, but as I was going through the questions, I was not doing it thoroughly well, was pre-thinking. So I went back to my concepts. I went back to the questions I was doing wrong or correct, and then understood how it was suggested to pre-think. Again, took a couple of days to sort of force myself to pre-think, not sort of jump right into the choices, Because once you start rethinking, there's no going back. I understood that it's so addictive, because once you do that, then going through the options is like a breeze. Because even if the answer that you pre-thought is not in the options, it sort of gives you what you're looking for. So as soon as you see the right answer, there's a light that just turns on in your mind. Yes, this is it. This is what I did not think of, but this is it. Right. So those are the two, three things that at different stages in my journey I sort of implemented, and then finally after some forceful feeding to myself of pre-thinking comprehension and everything, I was able to see that improvement in the practice tests and the mocks. Yeah.
So it seems like you, again, here, what I'm really enjoying is the structure that you followed and the willingness that you had to let go of things that weren't serving you in this space, right? So
Yeah.
whenever something didn't really fulfill its purpose on the GMAT side, you understood, okay, maybe I need a new strategy. It doesn't help me to hold on to things that aren't giving
Right.
improving my score at all, right? And I can really see how that attitude has played out because when I look at your work on CR, when I look at your work on
Mhm.
RC, right? You've really gone through, you've really internalized those processes. And then when I look at your Spolranium, I can see the effect of those changes in your attitude, right? If I look at it, you move from a 55 to a 60% hard accuracy. And all of these stats really just go ahead to show that you were ready to excel on that test day and get to
Yeah.
that 84. So congrats, kudos on that front.
Thank you so much, Rita. And one more thing, as I'm seeing my scores, I understood that since CR is behind RC, and this is the same thing that I saw when I was preparing, I understood that RC automatically comes to you once you get your CR skills in place, because CR requires a more analytical approach. Once you master that approach, once you spend more time on CRs and you're able to pre-think all the answers and everything, RC automatically comes, because I was not seeing results on RC initially, and then I got concerned with it. But once I started doing CR really well, I automatically saw an improvement. So that's what I would suggest to anyone who's sort of struggling between these two concepts. Firstly, master your CR, because RC, halfway you're there. You might have to take in a few other skills to do that, but it's there. And then once you get to RC, the other thing that worked for me, and I'm just sort of remembering that, is being like sort of imagining yourself completely to be in the shoes of the author. You're just so passionate about the passage that's there in front of you. You're sort of doing hand gestures. I mean, not in my actual exam, but in my mocks and everything, in my practice tests, I was just sort of doing hand gestures. Yes, this happened, so these are the 3 points. Yes, of course, this is it. Yeah, so how can this happen, right? So all of those passionate questions came into my mind, and that's where I was able to also understand the tone of the author and what is he trying to say, and what questions, like what would he most agree on, stuff like that. So when you're in the minds of the author, there's no easier way to do this, right? You can just very quickly mark what you would agree on. So that's also something in RCs that worked for me towards the end, when I started inculcating this habit.
And I think what that also really says is, you knew that in order to excel and to get to that great score, you could not afford to be at the surface level of your prep. You
Mhm.
had to dive in, you had to be actively engaged with everything that you
Right.
were learning because a great score requires that great effort, and you realize that you had to really dig deep into what you knew, who you were, and how you engaged with everything in order to really make that happen. So
Yeah.
kudos to you for that.
Thanks for that. Yeah.
Okay, so now you had your verbal in place and you already had your quant in place, which is when you moved to data insights. And on
Mhm.
data insights, you've achieved a great D86, which is a 99th percentile score, something that is still a pretty rare score for us to see test takers achieve. What challenges, first of all, did you face on the DI section from that first mock onwards? And how did you evolve into a 99th percentile scorer through your journey?
Right. On DI, Rida, I scored a reasonable score. D81 was where I started with, right? So I was sort of told to look for an improvement of 2 to 3 points, which was I was thinking of, and we discussed and we strategized around that. But even from that first mock itself, DI scared me. Even though it was an okay score, it scared me, because I was just, if I remember correctly, I was just on the 13th or the 14th question when the section timer ran out. And I did not expect that to be a D81, but it was, because that's a problem that many students face, right? But I was just shocked, because what if that happens on the test day itself? What if I am just on the 10th question and I'm not able to solve everything? Because there's so many things to do in DI. Just one question has 2 to 3 parts. So you're essentially solving 3 questions in one question time, right? So that's when I started with DI, I was focusing on the concepts just as soon as I was done with the concepts, because that doesn't take a lot of time. It's basically something that we've done all our life, or we do every day in our jobs. It's just reading charts, reading tables, understanding data. So that's everything that we're already prepared for in our professional journeys. But what really comes as a challenge, and was obviously a challenge for me, is time management. How to get through the entire section and not just get through it, the last 3 4 questions, just to mark them and not get penalized for leaving a question, but how to actually get through the entire section. That's why I gave a couple of DI sections with clear time management strategies in place. Like for example, the first 5 questions we'll do in, let's say, 14 minutes, and then the next 3 questions in 11 minutes. And now we're done with 25 minutes. 20 minutes are left. 10 questions, so 2 questions per minute. So 2 minutes per question, right? So that's this exact breakup for myself really helps. So I was always looking at the timer. That of course takes up a lot of your time calculating, but it's worth it. I did that in all the 3 questions, had different time periods marked clearly for myself, and that really helps. For example, before starting an RCA, because you're typically expected to do an RCA in 3 to 4 minutes, right? Read an entire RCA and comprehend it really well. So I would look at the timer. Let's say it's 36 minutes remaining, so I have to get it done by 33 or 32 maximum. So that's something that takes your time, calculations, and keeping that in mind. But it's really worth it, because that ensures that you're not spending any more time than you're required. Or if you are, you can just like there's a red alert in your mind, and you just go to the next thing that you're supposed to. So in DI also, that was an active strategy, that you cannot and will not spend more time than required on a question, right? So it's very easy to spend 5 minutes on a question in DI because there's a lot to do. But what if you don't? What if you get through it really fast? If you're not able to get it, just guess it and move forward. Next time we'll just learn it, and maybe we'll be able to do it in 3 minutes, right? So actively doing that in sectionals and in mocks helped me improve my score in DI. It was not the concept, it was not something that is coming to you. It's this active and very deliberate time management. So that was one thing. But then when I was analyzing, so that was the first strategy. But then while I was analyzing, I understood that DS is also something that is very lightly taken, but it's not. It seems easy because there's just like 2 statements that you have to analyze, and then you know what the 5 options are saying, right? But it's very easy to forget about the smaller cases, or the out of the box cases in DS. You wouldn't do that in Quant because you're prepared for it. You're prepared to put in all the constraints, analyze all the cases. But in DS, it becomes a problem because you're sort of rushing through and you think that it's a very straightforward question, but it's not. There's always a twist. So I kept that in mind that in DS, there's always going to be a twist. Even if there wasn't, look for a twist. So or more often than not, there is. So that's how DS got improved eventually, because that's a mistake that I made, especially during my practice. Yeah.
Got it. And you mentioned that you really worked on that time management, you really worked on DS, looking at these very specific twists and things like that. But for other question types like your graphs, tables, your MSR, what very specific steps did you take to manage your time outside of that mock environment, when you were learning about the strategies and when you were doing that practice?
Right. For tables or charts, it's very easy to gloss over them and just then move to the questions. But what happens in that case is you anyways have to go back to the chart and understand what it really says. What's the x-axis? What's the y? What are the 3 4 elements that are there, right? So I understood that again after making a lot of mistakes, that's what I'm doing, and I have to just while I'm going through the chart, I have to understand what the chart is saying. What are the different lines saying, what's the columns and everything. So once I did that, because once you go to the questions and then you see what the question is asking, you just go back to the right area. That saves you a lot of time. There's no going back and forth, because if you don't do that, you read the question and then you search for that in the chart, and then you have to just make sure that you're searching for the right thing. So you go back to the question again before marking, right? So that's one thing that I sort of rectified along my journey, is that I have to understand the chart. If you're not understanding, it's fine. If it's a difficult chart, it's fine. Maybe the statements there would help. But if you are able to understand, just understand what is said, both in the charts and the tables. So that saved me a lot of time then. And also in DI, I had this problem of marking the wrong answer because I did not read the question properly, or I read it and while I was analyzing the table, I forgot what was really asked, right? So just before clicking on next or before marking the answer, I gave the question a quick read. That that saved me like 3 or 4 misses in the sub parts of DI because that happened a lot, right? So these are the 2, 3 very specific things that I did to sort of improve on the individual, like you said, uh, graphic interpretation or the table analysis.
Wonderful. And I think, as we can see from the results, those strategies paid off. And it's these small things, just verifying that what you're choosing as the option choice is what the question is actually demanding of you,
Yes.
making
Yeah.
those choices to invest time in your initial understanding and owning that data set and then moving to those option
Mhm.
choices. They're actions that are very small but have a very significant impact overall on
That's
that
true.
score. So I'm very glad that you made these deliberate choices and therefore we're at that 99th percentile score. So kudos again once to you, right? All right. We have verbal, we have DI. Now, on the quant side, I know that you, like you mentioned, you were already on the stronger side and you went through the quant course pretty rapidly. What enabled that rapid improvement and maintenance of quant, and what did you focus on the quant side?
On the quant side, since we were starting from Q86, so I knew that all the concepts are in there. I just have to brush up on those concepts and maybe practice more on the time management and the accuracy side, so that a 2 to 3 point improvement is something that we can easily target. It's not going to be that hard once you work on the concepts. But the challenge that Quant has, it's a very lengthy course. So you have to sort of give in like 3 weeks dedicated to Quant just to be able to complete things. And sometimes it may take longer, which it did for me. I thought it was going to be done in 3, 4 weeks, but it was not. So that's when PACE really helped me understand which are the specific areas which I can skip. So while giving a diagnostic quiz at the beginning of the concept, you'll understand which exact question pertains to which exact concept, and if you know this, you may skip it. Sometimes I knew that this was a question that sort of took me 6 minutes to solve, so no, I have to anyways do that concept file. So you have to have that internal analysis also ongoing with PACE.
Mhm.
But PACE helped me save like 17 hours, 18 hours on one specific concept, right? So that was a lot when you're doing such a heavy course. Quant requires what, 120 to 130 hours of concepts itself, right? So that really helped me. The pace thing plus understanding where I need to sort of overrule pace and go by myself because I know that this is something that I need to do, and then just sort of practicing more than focusing on the concepts. But this was again a challenge. I mean, not even a challenge. It was something that I sort of maybe won't recommend to anyone who's going through the same thing. Do not underestimate quant. Even if you're good at quant, do not underestimate it. That's why I got from Q86 in my diagnostic to a Q84 in my final exam because I sort of underestimated the concept side of it. I thought that going through the course quickly would just help me brush up on my concepts and then I'll be able to practice and get through it. But I was in the last week of my prep when I finally once I completed the course, I went to verbal to DI, and then in the final week of my course, I was going back to quant and realized that I'm not getting the right accuracy. It was sort of becoming the weakest section because I underestimated it. I thought that I knew about it. So do not underestimate. Go through it properly. Again, if you have a time constraint, of course, it's your stronger section, go through it quickly, but then don't think that it's going to be automatically converted to a right score. You have to practice and you have to understand all the questions. So that's one big mistake that I think I made, and that's what got me to Q84. But yeah, I mean, rest of all the strategies and everything, those worked for me with all the pace, with all the sections and everything. It worked out well.
Understood. And I think that's a very important fact. You cannot underestimate what you think your strongest section will be.
Yeah.
Because the GMAT is such an insidious exam that if you let one ball fall, you're not
Yeah.
juggling anymore, right?
Yeah.
So it
Yeah.
is important that you keep that focus as you go through. Like you said, if you're short on time, then sacrifices have to be made. But if you do have that time to spare, make sure that you don't leave any stone unturned at all.
Yep.
You are
Yep.
there, right?
Definitely. Yeah.
Now, throughout all this, we've mentioned practice and the importance of it. And I know that you practiced quite a bit on the Scholaranium platform as well, right?
Mhm.
How did having such a platform enhance your prep journey, especially as a working professional?
Because yeah, you're right. As a working professional, you can't spend a lot of time understanding where you went wrong, right? You need a proper sort of reporting structure in place to help you understand where you're faltering. I mean, is it the medium difficulty questions? Is it the hard questions? Is it probability versus is it arithmetic? I mean, all of that. It's sort of scholarism defines that for you, concept by concept, last 10 questions, last 20 questions. So what's happening? Are you improving or not improving? Because if you give a couple of bad tests, you sort of go back, understand, fix a few mistakes, and then give a test again. But then you have to understand, did that particular part improve, right? So Scholaranium really helps you understand that from every possible way, right? I mean, you can look at it, slice the data in different ways possible, and just sort of understand where you're going wrong. So along with that, and then you can of course go back to your error logs, understand where you started and what are the typical mistakes that you're making, and then solve solve it that way. Also, Scholarly has a very good feature in terms of creating a custom quiz where you can just have all the incorrect questions that you had done in a particular concept, medium hard difficulty. Just make a quiz out of it and do those again in a timed environment or as a practice mode environment. It's just very useful to sort of go over your mistakes and solve them again, because I understood that even when I was getting questions wrong, writing them down, reading through them was not able to get me to that last final answer, right? You understood the concept, but you were just not there yet. So while solving them again in a test environment, you get that, right? So that's where Scotland really helped me in Quant specifically.
Understood. So that played a pivotal role. So now you've had your three subsections in place, you've practiced to perfection. The last
Mhm.
piece is really the mocks, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So what were your key takeaways during that mock
Mhm.
phase, other than the timing piece that we just talked about?
Yeah, so of course, everyone, and this goes without saying, everyone should give a diagnostic mock. You have to understand, and this is on the first day of your prep. Do not think that you'll do a couple of things, revise a couple of things, watch a couple of YouTube videos just to see what concepts are there. Just give it. It's not going to be seen by anyone. It's just going to be your improvement journey, right? So the first day diagnostic mock, and it helps you understand which are your stronger areas, like it did for me in quant. So I was able to spend lesser time in quant and sort of focus more on verbal, which was the most problematic area. But then after that, you start your prep whenever you do like if that that may have some gap from your diagnostic mock. But whenever you do, once it's one section, then you should give a mock again. I mean, I sort of faltered on that as well, but then later I realized that just giving mocks 1 week in advance to your exam might not be as useful. Like once you're in that journey, you're in that zone, you should sort of like keep on understanding your improvements. If you got a Q84 in your mock, what is it now after you're done with the quant course? Verbal and DI may still be a problem. That's okay. Again, these mocks are not going to be seen by anyone, so don't think that you have to you have to have a score closer to your perfect score, right? So keep giving mocks once you're done with one section, then another section, and then another section, right? So that'll help you chart out your improvement in individual sections also. Another thing is that in the last week of the prep or last 10 days of the prep, you have to sort of phase out your official versus your coaching center mocks. Like coaching center mocks are great for practice, but official mocks are great for you to sort of just understand what GMAT is. What is it going to be on your test day? How to save time, how to sort of know what the interface is going to look like, not spend a lot of time reading the instructions. So giving as many official mocks possible is also a great strategy. But the point is that you have to give them somewhat closer to your GMAT exam. So the last two mocks that you're giving before your GMAT should be the official mocks, not the coaching center mocks, because then you're sort of into that zone. You're into the test center environment also, right? So that's how I phased it out. Another thing, and this is either something that you suggested to me and which worked out great, was 1 and 2 we get as free mocks once we book our exam, right? But 5 and 6 are the new mocks. So giving one mock out of the new ones, because there's some changes in the question, there's some additions to the question bank, so you get some new questions also. That I think is was a great advice, and I got, I think, mock 5 if I'm not wrong, and mock 5 did have some new questions. So that's that's when I realized that yes, this is this is something that I would suggest to everyone. Don't just rely on the free mocks. Either get all the 6 mocks if you have got the time, then it's going to work out great for you. But otherwise, get one of the new ones, either 5 or 6, so that can help you understand the new questions. So overall, I mean, I gave mocks just in the last 7, 8 days of my prep, and there was an improvement seen. But then mocks also help you understand where you're faltering, and then sort of work on those areas just for the last week of your prep, right? And just trying to give mocks at the same time that your exam is going to be, because I am not a morning person. I had my exam at 10:15, 10:30 in the morning. It might sound like it's a reasonable time. For me it's not. So getting up at 8 in the morning, it's not my reasonable time. So that's yeah, so that's when giving mocks in the last week, I had to get up and give them at almost the same time that you're going to be giving your exam, so that you know that you're going to be fresh that day. You're sort of not going to be yawning in the middle of the exam. So just try to make that happen if that's possible, because for someone that might be nap time in the afternoon if you have an afternoon slot, right? So give your mocks, all the mocks that you're giving at the same time, so that helps you stay fresh and alert during that time.
Absolutely. And I think this is a well thought out. It's like a dress rehearsal before opening night, right?
Uh,
You make sure everything is in place. You know how the stage
yeah,
works. You know that one squeaky floorboard that you don't want to step on, right? So it's just ensuring that there are minimal to no surprises on that test day, and you walk into
exactly.
what you've already done before. It's nothing that you
Exactly.
activate there.
Like dress rehearsal thing is so yeah, you put it exactly right, because I was giving mocks from of course mocks and sectionals from the course that I have. And then I, because you have that timer which says how much time that you've spent on that question, but then I expected that on the GMAT official mock as well, but it was not there. So like you have to sort of calculate it yourself, that you're starting this let's say RC, if you're keeping a check on that. So you're starting this RC on 35, where do you want to end up on? So you sort of, your calculations increase. So this was a surprise for me. So all of these things, official mocks and simulating sort of the real test day, that really helps. Yeah, prepare you for it.
Wonderful. So, I'm all of this led to the fact that you walked in the test center and you did really well. And we've mentioned me throughout this entirely, but from July onwards, you've really also been part of the Last Mile Push program.
Yeah.
How was that useful overall to have that mentorship and guidance throughout this 2 months of prep?
I mean, it's more, I mean, of course, you have a mentor, so you can expect that guidance. You can go to them with all the questions that you have. They're going to help you with that. That's a given. That's going to help you. But more than that, there was that extra layer of accountability which helped me, like, sort of be there in that zone throughout. Because it's very easy when you're working and when you're here and there, and there's a lot many things going on. So it's very easy to just sort of fall out of that GMAT zone, right? But then there's that other person who's there with you on that journey and just asking you where you are. And it just having regular check-ins, and you've committed to them that by next week, let's target this. This is what I'll do. These are the 5 tests that I'll give. So all that extra layer of accountability does is just sort of keep you in check, that yes, you have to do this, you have to report it to someone. And of course, that someone is also going to that for me was you, of course. So Rida is going to I have to sort of I cannot go back to Rida and say that Rida, I was not able to do this, काम आ गया था, or anything like that. But I have to do this, and if there is any problem with that, if I'm not scoring, I also had that confidence that yes, once I take this to Rida, she's going to suggest me like 5 different steps to counter this challenge, right? So that's that added layer of accountability and added layer of protection against any challenge that you're going to have. That really helps you and sort of makes this journey feel seamless rather than going through it alone. So that mentorship really helped me. And of course, if you're someone who's just looking to give GMAT for the first time, which was my case. Secondly, you're just going to have to give it in 2 months, and you have a lot of work to do. Long work hours, and you don't know if you'll get the right time to do it. So that extra sort of strategizing with another person who's obviously an expert in this field and sort of solving your problems with you is a great add-in to that journey, which really helped me.
But I'm super glad to have been part of your journey. I know our passions as well, right? And we're so happy that you are at this phase in your GMAT prep with such a great score and we can close this chapter for the first and last time with a level of confidence, right?
Yeah.
And before we move forward, I just also really want to show people what your plan looked like as part of the LM program, where we really broke down everything that you needed to do. Let me actually move this to not started so we can read more easily, right? Exactly what you needed to achieve, your medium accuracies, your hard accuracies, right? How much time it would take. And you filled in these dates, and we helped keep you accountable to those dates
Yeah.
as you really went down the line, right? So that was, I think, really, really important to just go both ways. You tell me I'm done by this time, and I'll make sure, yes, you are going to be done by this amount of time. That's going to happen for sure. So wonderful.
Yeah.
I'm really glad we were able to do that, right? So now that you're done with prep, right, and you've given some really stellar advice throughout this entire interview, I think it's a lot of great advice, both in that GMAT prep environment, in that mock environment, and even outside with what you do in your day to day. Is there any other last piece of advice that you want to give to aspirants out there as they embark upon their own GMAT journeys?
I think it's mostly broadly covered across sectionals, but it's also about the fact that GMAT is not an exam of heavy studying or heavy practicing. It's mostly a mindset that you have to inculcate. It's an exam in exam giving, sort of, it's a subject in just exam giving. So you have to understand how to give the exam right. So that's where your mocks and that's where your practice and your the zone that you're in, the mind space that you're in comes into the picture. So if you're calm on your test day, you know what you've done and you understand which questions to leave and when to leave them. And what is it that you have to do in the first 15 minutes? What you have to understand that you can't leave a question. When is it that in the starting of the exam you can spend more time because those will cost you dearly if you don't get them right. But at the end of the exam, you can sort of get through everything. So all of those strategies in place, all of those small points in place about how to give the exam are they make up like 10 to 20% of the exam, which was a realization which came like 3 4 days in advance to my exam. But I would like for everyone to understand just this is how it is going to be, right? So more than the concepts itself, you have to focus on this. I mean, you can't just keep studying till the last day just give your GMAT because it's not going to be as straightforward as it seems, right? So that's where it is. But like I said, open your books daily. That's it. 15 minutes, that's all it takes. Even if you have 20 days of prep, just open your books daily if you're not getting the time. But you have to sort of be in that zone, be in that mix. You have to care about GMAT because otherwise your top priority is always work. And that's how it's supposed to be. That's what it should be, right? But then once you don't open your books, your priorities sort of they fizzle. And then second priority has to be GMAT. So accordingly, just open your books. If you need time off, just ask for time off because that's what I did. I had 1 week off before my exam, so I talked to my managers at my job, and they were able to give me that 1 week off, and that really helped me. So if you're able to do that, that 1 week off is also going to be helpful to you to sort of collect your thoughts and everything. So that's what it is. Yeah.
So, no, I think it's a good piece of advice to really round out about, you need to care about the GMAT for it to care about you.
Yeah.
So, very, very well said. But like I said, Akshara, you've had some amazing improvements. You've done such a great job throughout your entire prep journey. And I know the entire e-GMAT team is just so ecstatic about your success as a whole. So,
Thank
thank
you.
you so much for sharing your wisdom with us today. And I'm sure it'll help a lot of GMAT aspirants out there.
All
For
right.
for anyone out there who is on that GMAT journey, who's not sure where to really go with their prep or has any doubts they need to clarify, you can always drop us an email or drop us a comment, and we'd be more than happy to help you out. But until then, thank you so much, Akshara, right? And
Thank you.
all the best for everything that's yet to come. But for everyone out there, all the best. Happy learning. Take care and have a wonderful, wonderful couple of days ahead. Bye bye.
Bye.